name is Deane, and I'm a visual artist. I wasn't always. As I say, graduated in 2012. I've had various jobs. I've been a library assistant. I've worked in the fashion industry. So it took me a while to actually find what I really wanted to do. So I sculpt and I stitch and I carve out of all sorts of different materials, but my most beloved material is glass. It's an amazing sculptural material. It transforms the way we look at things. Even just by looking through it, it can distort, can reflect, make things much bigger and much smaller. So I find as a sculptural material, I can change the way the audience looks at an object, whether they're looking through it or if I can draw them into the piece. So I work with the inside space as much as the outside space. And those are some of the qualities that I really enjoy using with this particular material. At the moment I'm based in Canberra and I work out of the Canberra Glassworks, which is the only glassworks in Australia, and it's a really fabulous place to visit if you're near Canberra. You can see live glass blowing and do all sorts of things, have a gallery, etc. But I studied at Sydney College of the Arts, which you can actually see if you look through the window. I used to walk past this building every morning on the way to the glass studio, so it kind of feels quite familiar. I've lived in Sydney for most of my adult life, but I was born in Germany to parents who were in the British Army based in Germany. I was there for about until they moved back to the UK when I was about 3 or 4. I moved to Australia when I was 13. So I don't really remember much of Germany, but I do have the most shimmering memories of the woods and the forests that my parents took me to, because my dad could take us to closed up areas that aren't used, so we got to go into some really lovely, mysterious places. So I did a uni degree when I was 34, and in visual arts, and not a bachelor, not fine arts, but visual arts, so quite a tactile. I was particularly wanting to study glass, and you can do that at Sydney College. But they had alongside the practical, they had quite a thick academic strand, which terrified a person like me who actually hates to write. And the idea that I also had to express myself in words is quite challenging. However, I'm a person who loves to read. I think I preferred reading to socialising when I was younger, something that I think bothered my parents somewhat. I thought that it was easier to live in someone else's world than to live in my own. However, studying at Sydney College, where I had to do an academic part and write a paper, I decided to study something I was comfortable with, which was folk and fairy tales. I read a lot of fantasy and science fiction, of which I think have very familiar tropes and symbolism that come from folk and fairy tales. So, studying folk and fairy tales changed the way I feel about my reading addiction and why I am so attracted to folk and fairy tales. I really do make pictures. all this studying of fairy tales get me? So this is the collection I have at home, but Sydney College of the Arts, which is based in the University of Sydney, gave me a humongous resource. So I got to read studies of anybody who'd written on anything on fairy tales. I've started to read, and also I got to have free interlibrary loans because I was doing all this paper, which I was very happy about. Okay, the next one. I think the thing that really attracts me about fairy tales is the element of transformation. And so, one of my favourite authors, Jack Sykes, if there's one constant in fairy tales, that is the element of transformation. And of course, Marina Warner saying that metamorphosis defines the fairy tale. And what is it about transformation that's really appealing to me? It is going to be clunky. A little out of whack, but so the more I like the fact that Marina Warner thinks that the more you get to know fairy tales, the less fantastical they appear. That they could really show real life, but they express hope against all the odds of gritted teeth. Hope, the hopeful journey, is the thing that I think really appeals to me. That transformation, when we're talking the springtime of fairy tales, says to me that things can change, that there's potential for new things, potential for growth, potential for myself to say that I could make my situation become something more, something different. And Terry Windling, who says that the fairy tale journey may look like an outward trek across plains and mountains and a fairy tale landscapes, but really it's a movement inwards and into the soul. And I like that idea. Appeals to me that whilst these kind of perhaps simple tales and simple and archetypes and symbols that we're all so familiar with are actually metaphors for what's going on inside the self. And Jack Sykes again, that the key purpose of folk and fairy tales is to awaken our regard to the miraculous condition of life. So you can see that I'm kind of a glass half full person. Or perhaps I need reassurance that the world can be a better place. And this is kind of a condensed quote. It's quite large usually. That through fairy tales runs a constant motif of man's struggle to find his true worth, his inner self, and his place in the universe. I think so, something that we all, okay, I'm going to huge sweeping generalisation here. That is something that we all struggle with at one time or another. And the chief motif is that initiation and integration, the transformation of man himself by himself, which is something that I feel is a really important part of life. So that's where I'm coming from with my art and how the kind of angle that I'm looking at when I look at different fairy tales. This is a piece called Into the Woods. It's an installation of cast glass, hand-cut silhouettes and animation. Which is a close-up of one of the pieces, so you can see the elements a little bit more. So I've picked a few common ones that most people are going to recognise, and one from the Welsh Mabinogi, which is Ludowith, who is a woman who is made out of flowers. So she goes from flowers to woman to owl, and I find that such dramatic transformation is why I'm so interested in it. So each character goes through their, I suppose, familiar transformation, and then I take them on a little bit further. So where can they go next? It's quite a short piece, but as it's about Navy, you kind of look down into it, and you're drawn into the glass pieces, and you're kind of watching the characters go where they will. And that's another close-up. This is of Sleeping Beauty, where the reflection, she's kind of healing. This is a small kind of piece where I went from kind of going where you could look into the woods to making an installation of cast glass twigs to kind of make you feel as though you were in the forest. So I wanted my audience to walk through the forest and feel as though that they were going on their own journey. And I was looking at the way that Jack Sipes kind of mentions that the forest itself is the site of transformation in quite a few ways, not all of them, but I was interested in that point being, or that the forest as being the point where the characters met their challenges and came through them transformed. So that's just a larger shot of more glass twigs. These are actually cast. I collected lots of twigs on my parents' property in the Central Coast, and each twig is dipped in the casting material, burnt out and cast. So each one is an individual X-twig. And whilst usually we call, when we use wax, we call it lost wax casting, and I call that lost twig casting. I'm not the only one. So. This is a piece called Woodcutter's Daughter, where I was looking at all the fairy tales that talk about, or start about a poor woodcutter who lived on the edge of the forest. And I was interested in the edge of things, the in-between things. It's not the forest, but it's not the town. Or where magic happens can often be at dusk or twilight, which is neither night or neither day. Okay, this is a piece that is on display here, the Forbidden Chamber. And the fabulous thing about presenting to a group of people such as yourselves is I don't have to tell you the story behind this. So you all, I hope, know exactly where I'm coming from. Of course, I chose the key because I found that was the most visually prevalent and important symbol in the tale. I often get asked about why the golden key is separate. And part of it is because I wanted to show the independence and the agency of the woman in the tale. There's also another piece that's on display. This is called New Stories from the Old Wood. Whilst I'm interested in the transformations of what characters go through in tales, I'm also really interested about the transformations of stories themselves, how they change from teller to teller, whether how they're reflecting mores and values of century to century, and how different think there's quite a small sighting of a man with horns on in a forest in the UK, and the way that certain fantasy novels have picked up this idea and run with it, and so many have retold this tale and embellished on it, it's actually almost become a part of a myth that some people, I do quite a lot of research to see if I could find where the threads went, that it's almost become a part of English mythology, but it actually isn't. But I'm really interested in how it has become part of that, and I was interested in the motif of the deer with the kind of floral growing antlers that I think was kind of proliferated from the Snow White and the Huntsman, where you see that deer which has these mad branches, and it's suddenly become an image that's really popular. Anyway, let's keep going. These are two lights that came out of the Into the Woods series, and a gallery asked me if I could turn them into objects. And the titles I've got from Caroline Duffy's Little Red Cap, which is a poem I absolutely adore and fits really well with so I've got the copper silhouettes here and the shadows are burnt into the wood. So I wanted still to be able to show the duality or the potential within the characters of being more than just one you can see on the outside. And this is a light that I made for a gallery in Melbourne, which has very similar qualities to that piece anyway, but the elements are being rearranged somewhat. So most pieces at the front are more kind of are pieces that I make because I've been touched by or inspired by a folk or a fairy tale, and these other pieces are more smaller production kind of pieces that I make. So the next thing I'm going to do is these are much smaller pieces, about yay big, made out of cast crystal, which the type of it's glass that has lead in it, and it's much lighter and really clear, so you can look inside the glass quite nicely. So the way I usually work through an idea, I read a lot, and I find that modern authors retelling fairy tales these days are where tends to be what sparks something up in my head. It can be a sentence or a feeling or something that's passed on. So a couple of years ago I was reading Margot Lanigan's Sea Parts, and I had read quite a few Selkie stories before, but this one really got my interest going. And so I read this and thought I'm really fascinated about the cloak, the coat that initiates the transformation from seal to human. And partly it was also, I read a paper by Midori Snyder on animal bridegrooms and other kind of characters who have, so swan maidens, who have a coat that, if they are without it, cannot transform back again. So I have the beginning of an idea, and then I go crazy on Pinterest. Or I just, depending on however you do it, I collect pictures. So so I was looking at selfies, which are seals and humans. So I've already got about 30 of these kind of pictures with people underwater. I'm trying to get a feeling of how we move underwater. Lots of seals, other people's works on selfies, places, maps, to really, I think this perhaps could be like the journey of the writer. Like I try to, there are no words involved. I try to get a feeling of skills and okay, so after I look at other stuff, I do my own drawings. For this particular project, I was lucky enough that my father was travelling a fair bit, so every time I went to a new city, I'd go into the museum and I'd go and draw seal skeletons, I'd go and draw stuffed seals, which fortunately I put as real seals, and just sketch and kind of just, you know, I keep a notebook and I'm constantly drawing it. So here's just a progression from the sculptor seal head, just going through. I work in either clay or wax, usually, to make my sculptures. So for this one, because I'm fairly sure that I'm going to cast it more than once, I make it in clay. I make a rubber ball around the clay, and that means I can pour lots of waxes. So this is the rubber ball, and I fill that up with wax and wait for it to cool. It's a bit like making chocolates, except it doesn't taste as good. And I have actually made that mistake. Never have wax, brown wax, and chocolate wax. So you kind of get not all wax is brown, but there's a lot of sculptures' waxes are. So I've got my wax, and then I make another cast over that, and I will either slump the glass in it or entirely fill it up. And that's one of the permutations of it. Was I made a stitched coat with map of the Orkneys Isles on the back, and a glass head and flippers. And I, for that particular exhibition, there are some embroideries up the back, some embroideries which showed seals and women in kind of similar poses. So they're kind of not terribly serious. And then some cast pieces. This exhibition was last year, and I'm doing another exhibition along the same lines this year, but I want to do some more animation. So I'm in the process of doing lots of drawings. I like to project the animation over the sculpture, because light and glass is obviously a fabulous combination, and the light, it's almost like drawing with light over glass. It's a really it's a fun thing to do. It takes ages, but it's a really interesting process. Oh, there's one of the embroideries. So finally, folk and fairy tales, for me, encourage us to believe that change and transformation are essential aspects of the human condition. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, I can't imagine the work that goes into what you do, and that was the perfect, I think, paper to kind of end with our theme of transformations. It's really perfect. I will allow one question before we go to the book launch.